The family sent the younger sister in place of the elder one for an arranged marriage with the vampire king, believing she would be nothing more than a sacrifice. They thought she was easier to lose. But the moment the vampire king saw her, he chose her. Not out of mercy. Not out of duty. He sensed something hidden inside her, a quiet strength and an honesty that set her apart from everyone else. What was meant to be a punishment slowly turned into the biggest turning point of her life. The fate they feared became the destiny she was always meant to claim, the girl they sent instead. The carriage smelled of rain-soaked leather and lavender oil, the kind used to calm shaking hands. Elara kept her palms pressed together in her lap, not to pray exactly, but to keep them from trembling. Outside, the forest leaned in like it was listening, its branches combing the wind. Every few minutes the driver clicked his tongue and the horses sped up, as if even they wanted to pass this road quickly. Elara wasn't supposed to be in the carriage. Her older sister, Myrle, had been promised to the vampire king in a treaty meant to end decades of fear and misunderstanding between humans and the Nightborn. Myrle was radiant and bold, the kind of person who walked into a room and made the air brighter. Elara was the one who cleaned up afterward, the one who brought tea, the one who apologized even when she hadn't done anything wrong. That morning, their father had stood in the dining hall with his ringed fingers locked behind his back and said, "Myrle cannot go." Myrle had cried, yes, but not from heartbreak, from anger. "I won't be traded like a crate of grain," she snapped, and she turned her face away like the whole world owed her gentleness. Their father's eyes shifted to Elara the way a desperate man looks at a door he didn't notice before. "You will go. You're adaptable." Adaptable, as if she were a cloth that could be cut to fit any wound. Elara could have run, she could have screamed, but she saw the fear under her father's pride, the worry under the servants' silence. If she refused, the treaty could collapse, and then the villages near the border would pay the price. Children, farmers, people who didn't get to choose pride. So she swallowed the lump in her throat and said softly, "I will go." That was the first courageous thing she did, and no one clapped for it. The castle appeared at dusk, rising from mist like a memory the world wanted to forget. Tall windows glowed with warm amber light, unexpectedly warm. Elara had imagined cold stone and shadowy halls, but the entrance was lined with lanterns and ivy, and the air carried the faint scent of baked bread. That confused her so much she almost laughed. A vampire castle that smelled like dinner. A guard in a dark cloak opened the carriage door. His voice was careful, not threatening. "Lady Elara, this way." Inside, the floors were polished wood, not tombstone. The walls held paintings of forests and oceans. It felt less like a fortress and more like someone's quiet attempt at beauty. Elara's steps echoed anyway, because fear has its own sound. They guided her to a high-ceilinged hall where candlelight trembled like nervous stars. A long table waited, set for 2. Not 20, not a crowd of staring nobles, just 2 plates and a silver teapot already steaming. Then he entered. The vampire king moved without hurry, like time made room for him instead of the other way around. His hair was pale, his face calm and unreadable, and his eyes, dark, watchful, didn't flicker with hunger the way stories warned. They held something else, something tired, something careful. Elara's knees wanted to fold. She forced them to stay strong. "Your Majesty," she began, and her voice wobbled. He raised one hand, not as a command, but like someone asking for peace. "You are not the woman in the portrait they sent last month." Elara's stomach dropped, so he knew. Of course he knew. She took a breath that felt too sharp. "No, I'm her sister, Myrle." The lie tasted bitter. She tried to hold his gaze and failed, her eyes falling to the table where a small vase of wildflowers sat between the plates. A ridiculous little kindness in a room meant for political decisions. The king didn't expose her. He didn't call guards. He didn't even look angry. Instead, he stepped closer and spoke so quietly she had to lean in to hear. "Tell me your true name." Ilara's throat tightened. Honesty could ruin everything. Lies could ruin her. She chose the smallest brave thing she could manage. "Ilara." For the first time, the king's expression shifted, just a fraction, like a door opening to a room he kept locked. His eyes softened, not with romance, not yet, but with recognition, as if he had been waiting for a name, not a title. "I see," he murmured. And then, to her shock, he reached into the pocket of his coat and pulled out a folded letter, creased from being handled too many times. He placed it gently on the table, as if it were fragile. "This arrived yesterday," he said, "from your sister." Ilara stared at the letter like it might bite her. Her sister had written to him. Why? What did she say? The king's voice lowered, a thread of emotion slipping through his calm. "Before you read it, you should know something. Your family did not send you here by accident." Ilara's fingers hovered above the paper, trembling again. The candles seemed to burn quieter. The warm smell of bread suddenly felt far away. "What do you mean?" she whispered. The vampire king looked at her like a man carrying a secret he hated, and when he finally spoke, his words landed like a slow thunder. "They sent you because they believe you will be easier to lose." Ilara's hand closed around the letter, but she couldn't open it. Her heart pounded so hard it felt like it was trying to escape her chest. She wanted to laugh from disbelief, and cry from shame, and run from the room, all at once. The king watched her, not with triumph, but with a strange, quiet grief, as if her pain hurt him too. And as Ilara finally began to unfold the letter, the seal cracking softly in the candlelight, she realized the next lines could change everything. Her sister, her father, the treaty, even the way the king saw her. She looked up, voice breaking. "Your Majesty, why are you telling me this?" The vampire king's answer came in a whisper, heavy with a compassion that made her chest ache. "Because I intend to choose you anyway." And the letter opened in her hands, revealing the first sentence, one that made Ilara's blood turn cold. "If you're reading this, it means my plan worked. The letter that wasn't love." The paper felt too thin to carry a betrayal, yet Ilara's hands shook as if it weighed more than the whole castle. Candlelight slid over the ink, and for a moment she couldn't read. Her eyes blurred with a sting she refused to let fall. Across the table, the vampire king sat perfectly still, his posture calm, but his attention sharp, like he was listening to her heartbeat the way others listened to music. Ilara forced her voice to work. "If you're reading this, it means my plan worked," she read aloud, because silence felt like surrender. The words scraped her throat. "I refused the marriage. Father panicked. He'll send you instead. Don't hate me for choosing my freedom." Ilara swallowed, tasting iron and old disappointment. That was Myrle, always choosing herself first, always calling it destiny. The letter continued, each line colder than the last. Myrle wrote about how Ilara was better suited for sacrifice, how Ilara was kind enough not to fight back, how the king would never notice the difference once the treaty was signed. And then, like a careless flourish at the end of a cruel painting, Myrle added, "Besides, vampires respect beauty and confidence. You can borrow mine for a season." Ilara's fingers tightened until the paper crinkled. The room seemed to narrow, like the walls were leaning closer to hear what she would do with her hurt. She expected the king to scoff, to confirm every nightmare she'd grown up with: monsters, hunger, power without mercy. Instead, his gaze softened, and his voice was low, controlled. "That letter is not love, it's fear wearing perfume." Ilara let out a sound that was almost a laugh, almost a sob. "You talk like you know my sister." "I know 1,000 versions of her," he said. "Courts are full of people who confuse courage with loudness." That caught Ilara off guard. She looked at him properly then, not just at his pale elegance, not at the careful way he held his hands as if to reassure her he wouldn't reach for her without permission, but at the tiredness behind his eyes. It wasn't the tiredness of a bored ruler. It was the weariness of someone who had been misunderstood for so long that he stopped correcting people. Ilara laid the letter down as if it might stain the table. "So what now?" she asked. "Do you send me back, punish my family, break the treaty?" The king's jaw flexed once. For the first time, something like anger flickered across his face, not at her, but at the injustice of it. "If I punish your family," he said, "your villages will starve. Your border will burn with panic. The ones who suffer will be the ones who had no vote in this bargain." Ilara's breath hitched. She had expected cruelty. He offered responsibility. He rose and moved toward a sideboard where a kettle steamed beside 2 cups. The way he poured the tea was almost human, careful, practiced, oddly ordinary. He slid 1 cup toward her, not close enough to invade her space, but close enough that she didn't have to reach too far. "I don't drink it," he admitted, nodding toward the tea. "But my staff insists it helps guests breathe." "Your staff," Ilara repeated. She didn't know why that sounded funny, but it did. The image of immortal night creatures debating the benefits of chamomile nearly cracked her fear in half. The king's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "They also argue about curtain colors. It's a fierce war." Ilara let out a real laugh then, small, startled, and painfully human. It escaped before she could stop it, and when it did, the tightness in her chest loosened just enough for her to remember she was still alive. The king watched her like that laugh mattered, like it was proof of something. Ilara sipped the tea. It was warm and sweet, and it made her realize how cold she'd been for days. "Why did you say you intend to choose me anyway?" she asked, steadying her voice. "You could demand my sister. You could demand anyone." His gaze drifted to the wildflowers on the table. "When I agreed to this treaty," he said quietly, "your council sent me a miniature portrait. The woman in it looked like she'd swallow the room whole." "Myrle," Ilara murmured. "Yes," he said, "and everyone assumed I would want that." He looked back at Ilara. "But I didn't agree to marry a performance. I agreed to marry a bridge." Ilara frowned. "A bridge?" "A person who can hold 2 worlds without turning either into ash," he replied, voice steady. "That takes patience, humility, kindness that doesn't beg for applause." His eyes pinned her gently, the way someone holds a fragile truth. "When you walked in, you didn't search the room for a throne. You searched for an exit and still stayed." Ilara's throat tightened again, but this time it wasn't shame. It was the shock of being seen, not for her usefulness, not for her silence, but for her courage. She tried to look away, but the king's calm presence anchored her. "You don't know me," she whispered. "I know what you chose," he said, "and choices reveal more than bloodlines." A knock interrupted them. A tall attendant stepped in, elegant and stern, wearing a silver emblem at his collar. He didn't look at Ilara with hatred, more like suspicion sharpened into duty. "My king," the attendant said, bowing. "The High Council requests the bride be presented tonight. They wish to witness the agreement and verify her." Ilara's skin went cold. Verify. The word rang like a bell of judgment. The king's eyes didn't flicker, but the air in the room felt heavier, as if the castle itself was holding its breath. "They will not inspect her like merchandise," he said, voice firm. "They will," the attendant replied carefully, "unless the treaty collapses. And if it collapses, both sides will blame you." Ilara's mind raced. If the council discovered she was Myrle, they might declare the marriage invalid. They might accuse her family of deception. They might accuse the king of weakness. Everyone would pull out their knives, not literal knives, but political ones: hunger, trade, fear, propaganda. Ilara set her cup down with a soft clink and stood. Her knees trembled, but she stood anyway. "I'll go," she said. The attendant's eyes narrowed. You. Alara looked at the king, searching his face for permission, for a sign that he would save her by refusing. But she saw something else, respect and concern and a quiet warning. This will be dangerous. I'll go, she repeated, stronger. Not as Myrle, as Alara. If the treaty is meant to be honest, then it has to start with honesty. The attendant opened his mouth as if to object, but the king lifted a hand. Wait outside, he commanded, and the attendant obeyed, though reluctantly. Now it was just Alara and the king again, and the silence between them felt intimate in a way that frightened her more than any threat. The king stepped closer, stopping at a respectful distance. If you do this, he said, voice low, they may try to break you with questions, with humiliation, with old stories about my kind. His gaze sharpened, not with menace, but with protective intent. I cannot promise you it will be easy. Alara's lips trembled. My whole life hasn't been easy, she admitted. At least this time I'm choosing. For a second, the king looked almost relieved, as if her bravery unknotted something in him. He reached into his coat again and drew out a ring, not ornate, not threatening, but simple, dark metal with a thin band of silver. He held it in his palm, open, offering rather than demanding. This is not a chain, he said. It's a shield. Wear it tonight and no one will touch you without my permission. Alara stared at it. A ring meant marriage, yes, but it also meant protection, status, a voice. Things she'd never been given without a price. And what's the price? She asked, barely audible. The king's answer came like a vow he'd been holding back for centuries. The price is that you will be treated as someone who matters, even if the world hates me for it. Alara's eyes burned. She lifted her hand, and he slid the ring onto her finger with such care it felt like a promise not to hurt her. Then the doors at the far end of the hall opened, and distant voices poured in, aristocrats, advisors, the rustle of silk and impatience. The moment of quiet ended like a candle snuffed by wind. The king leaned close, his whisper meant only for her. Stay by my side, he said, and if fear tries to steal your voice, squeeze my hand. I will listen. Alara nodded, heart hammering. They stepped forward together into the bright, watching crowd. At the top of the grand staircase, the High Council waited like a wall of polished smiles. One elder lifted a monocle and inspected Alara the way people inspect a flawed jewel. Introduce yourself, the elder said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Name and lineage for the record. Alara felt every eye cut into her skin. Her mouth went dry. The ring on her finger suddenly felt hot. She opened her lips to speak, truth on one side, survival on the other. And from the back of the hall, a familiar, sweet voice rang out, casual as a joke. Oh, good, Myrle called, stepping into the candlelight with a grin. You started without me. Alara's world tilted. The crowd murmured. The elder turned, shocked. The king's hand tightened slightly, steadying her. Myrle's eyes landed on the ring on Alara's finger, and her smile sharpened into something dangerous. Alara tried to breathe, but the air wouldn't come. Because now the lie wasn't just exposed. Now it was a trap, set by the one person who knew exactly how to hurt her. And the vampire king, still calm beside her, whispered words that turned Alara's panic into a new kind of fear. She didn't come to reclaim her place, he said. She came to take yours, the choice that broke the curse. Myrle walked down the aisle of candlelight as if she owned it, her dress too bright for the room and her smile too sure. The court parted for her without thinking, trained by years of obeying confidence. Alara felt the old habit rising in her. Step back, disappear, let the louder person take the air. But the ring on her finger was warm, steady, like a quiet heartbeat that wasn't hers alone. The High Council elder recovered first. Lady Myrle, he said, stiff and relieved, as if order had returned. There seems to be confusion. Confusion? Myrle laughed lightly. No, Elder, just a misunderstanding. Her eyes slid to Alara with a sweetness that only Alara could recognize as sharpened. My sister is so eager to be helpful. She got carried away. A few nobles chuckled, eager to side with the easier story. Alara's cheeks burned. She waited for her father's voice in her memory, adaptable. She waited to feel small. The vampire king didn't let the room swallow her. He stepped forward, not fast, not dramatic, but with a gravity that made the laughter die out. There is no misunderstanding, he said. There was a substitution. Gasps rippled through the hall. Myrle's smile faltered for the first time. The elder lifted his chin. Then the treaty is threatened. The king's gaze stayed steady. The treaty was threatened the moment your negotiations treated a human woman like a sealed package. His voice wasn't cruel. It was honest, and that honesty made the room uncomfortable in a way power often does. Myrle's expression hardened. She took one more step, tilting her head. Your Majesty, she purred, surely you understand appearances. My sister is kind, yes, but kindness isn't what a kingdom needs. Choose me and you'll have strength, confidence, a queen who can stand beside you. Alara heard the message beneath the words. I am the better prize. She always had been in everyone's eyes. The king looked at Myrle for a long moment, and then he said something that made the air go still. I do not need a queen who knows how to win rooms, he said quietly. I need a queen who knows how to save people inside them. Myrle blinked, thrown off balance. Alara felt her lungs finally fill, shaky but real. The king turned slightly toward Alara, and his voice softened without losing its power. Alara came here knowing she might be rejected, mocked, or punished. She came anyway because she believed peace mattered more than her pride. He lifted Alara's hand, not like a trophy, but like a vow. That is courage, that is leadership. Myrle's cheeks flushed. She came because she's easy to push, she snapped, the mask slipping. She always has been. A murmur rose. Some looked away, uncomfortable. Others leaned in, hungry for scandal. Alara's throat tightened. The old Alara would have apologized just to make the tension stop. She would have offered herself up as a mistake to be corrected. But then she felt the king's thumb press lightly against her knuckles. A silent reminder, I will listen. Alara stepped forward on her own. The hall seemed to widen around her, the way the world does when you finally stop shrinking. I did let people push me, Alara said, voice trembling but clear, because I thought being useful was the same as being loved. She looked at Myrle, and the words hurt to say, but they were true. And because I was afraid if I stopped, no one would choose me. Myrle scoffed, but her eyes flicked toward the council, calculating. Alara turned to the elder. Yes, there was substitution, she continued. And you can punish someone for it if that's the only language you speak. But if you break this treaty, the ones who suffer won't be my father or my sister. It will be the villages, the borders, the children. Her voice steadied as she spoke, strengthened by the simple fact that she wasn't lying anymore. I came to protect them, and I won't pretend to be someone else to do it. The elder's jaw tightened. Bold words from a girl with no authority. The vampire king's eyes narrowed, not in threat but in fierce resolve. Authority is earned, he said, and tonight she earned it. Myrle's smile returned, sharper than before. How touching, she said, then lifted her voice for the whole hall. But there's something else you should know. The king cannot choose freely. The room stilled again. Myrle reached into a small jeweled purse and pulled out a thin strip of black fabric, embroidered with strange silver symbols. She waved it like a ribbon. This, she said, is an oath bind. Alara's stomach dropped. She had heard whispers of ancient magic, old agreements that chained kings and queens to choices made long ago. Myrle's eyes glinted. Your Majesty made a vow to marry the first daughter of my father's line presented at the moonlit council. That vow was sealed by your own blood and the council's witness. The elder's face stiffened. That vow exists, he admitted, reluctant. Alara looked at the king, heart pounding. His gaze lowered for a fraction, and she understood with a sick clarity. Myrle wasn't bluffing. Myrle took a slow step closer to Alara. So it doesn't matter who you are, she whispered, loud enough to sting. The vow will force him to choose the right bride, me, the true first daughter. The crowd erupted in low voices. Some looked triumphant, as if the story had corrected itself. Others looked uneasy, because forced vows are ugly even when they're legal. Alara felt cold spread under her skin. She didn't want a love that was compelled, a marriage that was a cage, for her or for him. She turned to the king and her voice broke. Is it true? The king didn't deny it. That honesty, again, sharp and painful but clean. Yes, he said. I swore it to end a war. I believed it was the only way to stop the bleeding. Alara's chest tightened. So you can't choose. His eyes held hers, full of something that looked like regret and something that looked like hope fighting to survive. I can choose, he said softly, but the vow punishes the choice. Myrle lifted her chin. Then be practical, she said sweetly. Pick me and spare yourself, spare your kingdom. Alara's mind raced, searching for a way out that didn't turn anyone into a casualty. And then she noticed something subtle, easily missed. When Myrle spoke, the black oath bind in her hand shimmered faintly, like it responded to her intention. It wasn't just evidence, it was a key. Alara stepped closer, eyes narrowing. You didn't just bring proof, Alara said. You brought the tool. Myrle's smile faltered again. Careful, she warned. Alara looked at the elder. If the vow was sealed with witness, she said, can it be unsealed the same way? The elder hesitated, only with equal cost. Alara's heart beat hard. Equal cost. Sacrifice. The word people always threw at her as if she was born to pay it. The king's hand tightened around hers. No, he murmured, understanding her too quickly. Don't. Alara looked up at him. In his eyes, she saw what no one had ever given her before, someone begging her not to disappear for others, someone who wanted her alive, whole, unspent. And that was the twist that changed everything. Alara didn't offer herself as payment. She offered truth. She turned to Myrle. You came here to take my place, Alara said, voice steady now. But you also came because you want control. You think you can use his vow like a leash. You think you can use me like a stepping stone. Myrle's jaw tightened. This is politics, Alara. Grow up. Alara nodded slowly. I am. Then Alara did the bravest thing she'd done yet. She stopped fighting for approval and started fighting for meaning. She faced the hall, speaking to humans and vampires alike. A peace built on coercion will always rot, she said. If you force a king to marry, you don't get loyalty, you get resentment. If you force a girl to be a bride, you don't get unity. You get a wound dressed up as a celebration. The elder's eyes flicked to the king, then back. And what do you propose? Alara drew a breath, tasting lavender and candle smoke. Let the vow stand, she said, and the room murmured until she raised her voice. But redefine what it demands. The elder frowned. You cannot redefine an oath. Alara looked at the oath bind in Myrle's hand. Oaths are built from words, she said, and words matter. The king's gaze sharpened, realizing her angle. His voice was low. Alara. She squeezed his hand once. Listen. Alara addressed the elder and the court. The vow says, the first daughter presented at the moonlit council, not the eldest by birth, not the loudest, not the prettiest, presented. Myrle's eyes widened, a flicker of alarm. Alara continued, Tonight I was presented. Not by trick alone, by a council that accepted me at the door, by a ceremony prepared for me, by a king who acknowledged me in front of witnesses. If you want law, then follow it all the way." The elder's face tightened. "You're twisting language." Alara's voice softened but didn't weaken. "No, I'm revealing it." Myrle stepped forward, angry now. "You were presented by deceit." Alara met her gaze. "And you came here with an oath bind to force him, which is worse." The hall fell into a tense silence. The elder looked uncomfortable because the truth was embarrassing. The council liked oaths when they controlled kings, but hated them when they protected the powerless. The vampire king spoke, voice ringing through the hall with calm authority. "I will submit to the oaths test," he said. A collective inhale. The elder's eyes narrowed. "The test is old, dangerous." "No," the king said. "Not dangerous, honest, and honesty frightens courts." He extended his hand toward Myrle. "Give me the oath bind." Myrle clutched it tighter. "Why would I?" The king's voice dropped, and for the first time the cold edge of royal command entered it. "Because if you do not, I will assume you came to sabotage peace, and I will end negotiations tonight." Myrle froze, calculating again. If the treaty died, she'd be blamed. Her beauty wouldn't protect her from political consequences. With an angry flick, she threw the oath bind onto the table. The king lifted it carefully, as if it were a fragile, poisonous thing. He looked to the elder. "Witness," he said. The elder hesitated, then nodded stiffly. "Witnessed." The king turned to Alara. "The oath will respond to the truth of intention," he said softly. "If you are here only from fear, it will reject you. If you are here to protect peace, it may accept you." Alara's mouth went dry. "And you?" "If I am choosing from pride," he said, "it will punish me. If I am choosing from duty and compassion," he stopped. His voice grew quieter. "It will free me." He wrapped the black ribbon around his wrist. The symbols glimmered, alive. The hall held its breath. The ribbon tightened slightly, like a question. The king's face didn't change, but Alara saw a small wince, like an old scar being pressed. Myrle smiled in triumph. "See, it hurts him, the oath knows." Alara's heart lurched. She stepped closer without thinking. "Stop," she whispered. The king opened his eyes and looked at Alara with an intensity that made her feel both terrified and safe. "Alara," he said, voice barely audible, "I have lived centuries with people expecting me to be a monster, and every year I believed I deserved the loneliness if it bought peace for others." The ribbon tightened again. Alara's eyes filled. "Then don't buy peace with your suffering," she pleaded. "Peace shouldn't require someone to be trapped." That was the moment the king's expression softened fully, not into romance, but into relief, like someone finally allowed to be human inside. He turned to the hall. "I choose Alara," he said clearly. "Not because she is easy, because she is brave, not because she is silent, because she speaks when it matters." The ribbon flared with silver light. Then, slowly, it loosened. A gasp swept the hall. The symbols dimmed, as if the oath itself had exhaled. The elder's monocle slipped a fraction. "Impossible." The king lifted his wrist. The ribbon fell away like ash on the wind. No fire, no harm, just a soft unraveling, like a knot untied after too long. Alara stared, stunned. It freed you." The king's voice shook just slightly. "It didn't free me," he whispered. "It confirmed what I was trying to become." Myrle stepped back, face pale now. "No," she said, furious and frightened. "That can't be right. I'm the first daughter." "The first daughter presented," the elder repeated slowly, as if tasting the phrase for the first time. His gaze moved to Alara's ring, then to the king's calm stance, then to the watching court. Politics shifted in real time. "The oath has spoken." Myrle's anger snapped into a desperate laugh. "Fine," she hissed. "Enjoy your saintly bride. She'll bore you within a month." Alara surprised herself by smiling, small, sad, but steady. "Maybe," she said, "but boredom isn't the worst thing, being unkind is." A few people in the crowd chuckled nervously, and one young noble actually smiled, as if he'd just seen someone stand up for the first time and it gave him permission to breathe. Myrle spun toward the doors, silk swirling like a storm. As she passed Alara, she leaned in and whispered, "You think he chose you. He chose what you represent. Don't forget what you are." Alara flinched, then didn't. She watched her sister leave, not with hatred, but with a strange grief. Myrle wasn't evil. She was terrified of being powerless, and she used people to outrun that fear. Alara understood her more than Myrle would ever understand Alara. The hall slowly resumed its sound, but something had changed. The vampires weren't watching Alara like prey. The humans weren't watching the king like a threat. They were watching them like a possibility. The elder cleared his throat. "If Alara is the bride," he said, "she must accept the rights of the Night Court." Alara's stomach dipped. New rules, new tests, new ways to fail. The king stepped beside her, not in front of her, and that quiet detail made her eyes burn again. "Explain the rights," he said. "Plainly, no traps." The elder looked annoyed, but he complied. "The bride must spend one night in the mirror gallery," he said. "It reveals what you hide from yourself. If she leaves before dawn, the marriage is void." Alara's pulse quickened. A gallery of mirrors in a vampire castle sounded like a nightmare dressed as tradition. The king leaned close. "You don't have to prove anything," he whispered. Alara looked at him and saw it the way he meant it. Not a test for his ego, not a performance, just concern. She nodded. "But I want to," she said, surprising herself. "Not for them, for me." That night, the mirror gallery was cold and quiet, lit by moonlight that fell through tall windows like spilled milk. Mirrors lined the walls, hundreds of them, each framed in dark carved wood. Alara walked between them, her footsteps soft on the polished floor. At first, her reflection looked normal, tired eyes, a simple dress, the ring like a small shadow on her finger. But then the mirrors began to shift. One showed her at home, younger, standing behind Myrle while people praised her sister's laugh. Another showed her father turning away from Alara's art sketches, saying, "Not important." Another showed the carriage, her own face pressed to the glass, trying not to cry. Alara's throat tightened. The gallery wasn't magic meant to harm. It was truth without padding. Then a mirror at the end of the hall showed something new. Alara saw herself older, wearing a crown, not heavy, not jeweled, but simple like the ring. Beside her stood the vampire king, not cold, not distant, but smiling faintly, holding a child's small hand between them. Around them, humans and vampires worked in a garden, laughing over something silly. Someone had dropped a basket of apples and it had become a game. It was warm, ordinary, peaceful. Alara's eyes filled. "Is that real?" she whispered. The mirror didn't answer with words. It answered with a feeling, not destiny, not guarantee, but possibility. Behind her, another mirror flickered, and this one hurt. It showed Myrle alone in a bright room, surrounded by fine things, yet staring at an empty chair like it was an enemy. For a moment, Myrle looked less like a villain and more like a girl who had been told love must be earned by winning. Alara's chest ached with unexpected compassion. She pressed her fingers to the glass. "I don't want you destroyed," she whispered to the image of her sister. "I just want to stop disappearing." The mirrors calmed. The air warmed slightly, like the gallery accepted that truth. When dawn finally bled into the sky, Alara was still standing. The doors opened, and the king waited outside, hands clasped, as if he'd been holding worry all night. He didn't rush her. He didn't demand a report. He just looked at her like her survival mattered more than ceremony. Ilara stepped into the dawn light and exhaled. The elder announced, voice reluctant but formal, "The bride endured the mirror gallery. The marriage stands." A cheer rose, not roaring, not wild, but sincere. Some vampires bowed their heads. A few humans wiped their eyes quickly, pretending it was dust. The king turned to Ilara, and in front of everyone, he did something no one expected from a ruler feared for centuries. He bowed to her first. Not as a show, as gratitude. "My queen," he said softly, "teach my court what your courage taught me." Ilara's voice was quiet, but steady. "Only if you teach my people what your compassion taught me." Later, as the celebration spread through halls that smelled of bread and lavender and fresh-cut flowers, something unexpectedly funny happened. A small, ancient vampire advisor, serious as a statue, tried to give a speech about eternal dignity, but tripped on a trailing ribbon and grabbed the nearest curtain to save himself. The curtain came down with a dramatic whoosh, revealing a hidden pantry stacked with sweets. For one stunned second, the hall was silent. Then Ilara laughed, full, unguarded, and the king laughed too, a low sound like he'd forgotten he could. Even the elder's mouth twitched, betrayed by the ridiculousness of it. Servants hurried to fix the curtain, but the mood had already changed. People weren't only witnessing a treaty, they were witnessing a court learning how to be human again. Ilara slipped away to a balcony for air. The morning was pale gold, the sky wide and clean. The king joined her, standing beside her with respectful distance, as if love to him was something you offered, not something you took. "I thought choosing you would cost me everything," he admitted, "but it feels like it gave me something back." Ilara looked at the ring. "It gave me something too," she said. "Not a castle, not a title, a voice." He nodded slowly. "You were sent here because they thought you were easier to lose." Ilara turned to him. "And you chose me because you didn't want to lose anyone." The king's gaze softened, and for the first time the romantic tension between them felt safe, gentle, earned. He didn't rush. He didn't claim. He simply reached out and waited. Ilara placed her hand in his. In that touch, she felt the deep message of everything she'd survived. Kindness is not weakness, humility is not invisibility, and courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it speaks in a quiet voice that finally says, "I am here." From below, a messenger's hawk landed on the railing, carrying a sealed note. The king frowned as he opened it, reading quickly. His face didn't harden with anger, it tightened with concern. Ilara's stomach fluttered. "What is it?" He folded the note and looked out over the waking kingdom. "A border village reports unrest," he said. "Not an attack, a rumor. Someone is spreading stories that the treaty is a trick." Ilara understood instantly. Fear always tries to return when peace begins. The king met her eyes. "This is where marriages like ours usually end," he said quietly. "In paperwork, suspicion, and the slow erosion of hope." Ilara lifted her chin, not naive, not fearless, but resilient. "Then we don't let it erode," she said. "We go there. We show them peace with our hands, not just our signatures." The king's expression shifted into something bright and steady. "You would walk into their fear." Ilara nodded. "I walked into this castle, did I?" For a moment, the king looked like a man seeing sunrise for the first time. "Then we go together," he said. They turned back toward the hall, toward the crowd, the treaty, the work of real peace. And as they stepped forward side by side, Ilara realized the ending wasn't a perfect happily ever after. It was something better. A life where she would no longer be a replacement. She would be a choice.